always made it happen and got things done. Mike is going to share with us today his take on what he believes the skills that the workforce needs to embrace for the future, especially as we go into this digital age. But maybe the best way to introduce Mike is to show you what he does.
Are you Mark? I'm Mark. Oh, God. Uh-oh. Right, Mike? Almost certain that's bad. Rookie mistake. I think I got it stuck. Oh. It's on my foot. Oh, son, that's all right. Holy smokes. Don't make it worse. That's what I do. Mike Rowe here to make things worse. Oh. I broke another scene. Oh, come on. I broke a hose? I think you're in the wrong hole.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Rowe. You clean it well.
Yeah, thanks. Don't stand too close. It gets awkward and weird. Hello, people. Got all the cell phones I love. Let's just get this out of my system right now. I want to get a picture, and I want to get one too, so. Need the people in the first row right here. Yeah, just give a big wave and let's get this out. There we go. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Hi. So nice to be back in San Diego. Last time I was here. What I do, I went down to the waterfront, the Star of India. Maybe you guys have seen the old tall ship down there. They let me for dirty jobs, fix all the rigging. You know, put hot tar on all the rigging. Got blisters, got humiliated, a lot of pain. It's fun. Yesterday was good too. It's a different show, but it's the same kind of thing. I'm still traveling around with people who do the kinds of jobs that make civilized life possible for the rest of us. I don't want to get too far into this before I make something perfect. I mean, you guys have seen Dirty Jobs, your favorite show? Woo! Not looking for people applause, just want to make sure I know who I'm talking to. Who hasn't seen it? Just a real quick show. So 1, 2, 3, get out. Yesterday, I shot a story for the new show. Great little story about a guy named Ali. He came over here from Turkey 10 years ago. Didn't speak the language. Today, he owns the largest pedicab business in the country. You've probably seen him in their blue shirts pedaling all over town. So to get a better sense of what that business was all about, he let me drive one of his pedicabs, and in the course of driving around San Diego. You got a lot going on now. In the course of driving around, I picked up probably 50 people or so, and I think many of them are in the room right now. A lot of people are here for this occasion. But it's funny, everybody asked me what I was going to talk about today. And I said, I don't know, what do you think I should talk about? And some people said, talk about Dirty Jobs. And other people said, talk about your new show. And some people said, talk about your foundation, MicroWorks, that's kind of interesting. But mostly, and without exception, everybody said, talk about connectivity. Talk about, Cisco connects people, and we're all in the IT connected world. Say something smart about being connected. I said, I can probably work with that, but I doubt that I'll do it in the conventional way. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it'd be a good opportunity to tell you a little bit about not just a connection, but maybe a disconnect, and maybe something you guys have experienced in your own way. For me, the whole business of Dirty Jobs and the whole path that that brought me here today was crooked, to say the least. But it actually started in 2001 in San Francisco, where the mail still comes to this day. I was there working for CBS, impersonating a reporter and a host, which of course is the only way to be a reporter or a host. Everybody kind of impersonates everybody, and I was working on a show called Evening Magazine, and it was a great little job. All I had to do was travel throughout the Bay Area. Some of you might even remember the show. And host it from a cool location. Could be a winery, could be a play opening up downtown, really anywhere I wanted to go. And it was a great job, and nobody watched the show, but I kind of enjoyed it, and I was just minding my own business, being a host, which is what I had done since I was fired from the home shopping industry 20 years earlier. And one day, sitting in my little cubicle, I got a phone call from my mom back in Baltimore to tell me my granddad had taken a turn and wasn't doing well. He was in his early 90s. Some of you know my granddad, not by name probably, but maybe you'll recognize his character. He only went to the 8th grade, but by the time he was 30, he was a master carpenter, electrician, steam fitter, pipe fitter, welder, mechanic. Guy could build a house without a blueprint, and often did. He just had the chip, you know. He just knew. And I wanted very much to follow in his footsteps growing up. But the handy gene, tragically, is recessive. And it went right over me. And my granddad was so patient. You know, I remember washing out of every shop class at school. You know, metal shop and wood shop and auto. It just didn't come easy. One day he told me I should maybe get a different toolbox. It was the best advice I ever got from him. But the point is, I'm sitting there with my different toolbox, impersonating a host, hearing about his failing health, and thinking to myself, you know, before he dies, I'd love to do a TV show that looked like work, something he would recognize. So I went to my boss and I said, do you really care where I host Evening Magazine from? He said, I really don't care about anything. Good. So I thought about it, and I called the city of San Francisco, and I said, I want to do a show about plumbers. I want to host Evening Magazine from the sewer. Karen mentioned that in her introduction, and it's probably a wildly, profoundly inappropriate story to share with you, so I'm going to. The story goes like this. I called the city, and they said, get your cameraman and yourself down to the intersection of Ellis and Jones in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. And a fellow named Gene Cruz will be waiting for you. So I did that very thing. I grabbed a cameraman named Branson, and we hopped in the Evening Magazine van, and we drove to the intersection of Ellis and Jones, and there was Gene Cruz wearing a rubber suit. And he had 2 more rubber suits with him, which he invited Branson and I to put on. We didn't argue. We looked around, there was no place to change, so we just dropped trowel and put on a rubber suit in the Tenderloin. I mean, at San Francisco, I'm sure it's not the first time this has happened. It was a first for me. So I say, Gene, what's the deal? And he says, well, officially, I'm a sewer inspector, and my job today is to go down into the sewers and look for bricks that have succumbed to the second law of thermodynamics, bricks which are rotting. And I'm going to make mortar, and I'm going to chisel out the rotten bricks and put in some fresh ones. And I said, look, that sounds great. All I really need is a place to shoot. Now, the night before, I had read all about the sewers of San Francisco, so my brain was packed with all the necessary information to create the illusion of short-term confidence, which, of course, is what I'm paid to do. And I am prepared to go into this alien environment and titillate the viewer with some interesting facts about this and that. So Gene says, down we go, follow me. I followed Gene, and Branson follows me. Has anyone ever been in a sewer before? Anyone? Yeah, this is going to be fun. So you go down about 12 feet down the ladder. Gene gets himself situated and walks around the corner. I follow him. And it takes a minute to get my head around all of it. The smell, of course, is indescribable. But it's the flow that's that really stuck with me. It was the speed and of the flow, as well as the composition. It's notable because the flow in a sewer is not just comprised of that which comes out of the human body, it's comprised of anything that goes down the toilet. And so they're plastic products, paper products, rubber products, lots of rubber products. Let's call them balloons. Unfurled balloons. Surprisingly long and in a rich variety of effective colors. They ride this chocolate tide and cling to my rubber suit like disappointing ornaments on some terrible holiday tree. I just couldn't take my eyes off my own feet. Festooned as they were with the accoutrements of modern plumbing. At one point, a turd floated by with the G.I. Joe figure on it. Scouts honor that, leading me to wonder, who's eating G.I. Joe figures? What's going on in San Francisco? So, all of this is processed very quickly in the reptilian part of my brain, and I realize as a trained show host, this is the ideal place to open an unforgettable episode of Evening Magazine. So I say, Gene, hang on just a second. I turn to Branson. I say, Branson, go ahead and roll. Well, Branson's already rolling. Branson's shooting everything. And I say, this is going to be great. It's so disgusting. My pops is going to love this. Red light comes on, I look at the camera and I say, good evening, San Francisco, and welcome to a very special edition of Evening Magazine. Tonight we're going to bring you to a different place, a special place, a place you won't soon forget. That's as far as I got. There was a gurgling sound that was increasing in volume, and it appeared to be emanating just on the other side of the wall to my right. And look, in the long history of gurgling sounds, nothing good has happened in the wake of said gurgle. And something did instinctively tell me to duck, but I didn't. And so through a small opening in the side of the wall, a fairly significant explosion occurred. The first turd caught me right here. Moist. And I realized intuitively this would be the time to stop. So I did, and the second burst sent just this arcing fountain of feces over my head and right into the lens of the camera. Some of that went right over the top and caught Branson right in the forehead. I turned to Gene, who was laughing. I wiped the poop off the side of my face and looked at Branson, who throws up. Not a big cinematic puke, but a very stately kind of. Never stop rolling. So I knew in that moment, based on my extensive research the night before, that I had chosen to open the show right next to a lateral. Laterals inform all major municipal sewage systems in the country, but the laterals in San Francisco are of particular interest because they follow the topography of the terrain above, right? And so in this way, hundreds of laterals feed into the main line, but many of them originate in places like Nob Hill and Russian Hill. So a society member of some standing has the opportunity to use their commode and send the contents hurtling into my workspace with a speed and velocity not often associated with track. And this is the reality of the sewers of San Francisco. They are surrounded by these hidden little landmines. And I realize all this in my head. Gene says to me, you know, Mike, when you're down here, it's best really to maybe you know, keep your mouth shut. And I said, yeah, Gene, I get it, but I'm the host of Evening Magazine, you see. I can't keep my mouth shut. I have lots of information I've memorized from extensive research the night before, and I am duty-bound to share it with the viewer from this unique locale. However, I don't necessarily have to do it right in this specific spot. So, off we go. Gene starts to duck walk through the sewers of San Francisco. It's just, you know, you're right here. He's very, very uncomfortable. Around his neck, he has a pail with mortar in it, and on his back, he has the bricks that ultimately he's going to use to replace whatever broken bricks he eventually finds. Anyhow, I just start to follow him as best I could. For the life of me, I can't understand how he's achieving any kind of forward locomotion because he's sloshing through the aforementioned effluvium with a speed that is truly impressive. But I followed him, and Branson follows me, and we come around the corner into a really unique intersection in the sewers of San Francisco. And when I say unique, I mean, it really was an optical illusion for me. We were underneath one of those grates up top on Jones Street, so 12, 14 feet above us, a little bit of sunlight snuck in, illuminating the preternatural blue in a way that I thought would be perfect for the opening of Evening Magazine. But most importantly, it was the walls. They were moving. The walls were literally moving. More specifically, the roaches on the walls were moving. As far as you can see, more than you can count. Thick, like fur on a weasel. Roaches. Big ones, thumb-sized roaches, you know? And I just was fascinated and horrified in equal parts and thought, surely this is where we need to open the show. So I said, Branson, roll. Branson's already rolling. I say, Gene, stand by. I turn to the camera, the red light comes on, and I say, good evening, San Francisco. Welcome to a very special Evening Magazine. Tonight, we're going to take you to a special place, a unique place, a place I doubt you'll soon forget. And that's as far as I got. Unlike their cousins, topside, the roaches in the sewers of San Francisco are not afraid of light. In fact, they're attracted to it. So the light on my helmet and the light on Branson's camera were essentially beacons of hope for the roaches. And in a very, very short period of time, I could feel them crawling on my back, over my helmet, my neck. I could also see them completely subsuming Branson, covering his camera on his face. He continued to roll, and I continued to speak, which was stupid. But I thought the shot would look so great that I really can't blame anybody for the crunchy sensation that occurred when I closed my mouth. And I spit out the roach. Gene said, I told you so. Branson threw up. Right on the cheese and right this nasty little kabuki in the sewer. I told you so. Gene says, please, follow me. This is not the place to do your open. I say, fine. Another 100, maybe 150 yards. Serpentining, twists and turns in the subterranean wonderland of the San Francisco sewers, and we finally come to the place of work. It's an archway. Gene pushes aside 300 or 400 roaches and reveals the bricks that need to be replaced. And he very quickly goes about the business of actual work, chiseling out the rotten bricks, replacing them, fixing the mortar, etc. I look around and I say, okay, you know what, this probably is the best place to open the show for real. We've got activity in the background. We've got an interesting setup. Branson, roll. I am. Okay. Good evening, San Francisco, and welcome to a very special Evening Magazine. Tonight we brought you to a special place, a unique place, a place I doubt that many of you will soon forget. And that's as far as I got. Because apparently, I had a co-host on Evening Magazine. I just didn't know it. He was of the Norwegian variety. About 4 pounds. Had a tail like a cable. He was a big rat, and he was covered in everything I've already described. This poor woman is holding her face like this. I warned you all. Karen invited me. What do you want? The rat crawled up the back of my rubber suit and in a twinkling appeared on my shoulder like a parrot in some terrible pirate movie, right? And I could feel his weight. And again, reptilian part of my brain, I knew what it was. I didn't want to look at it, but you can't not. So I looked at it. And the rat looked at me. And the rat went really loud. And I screamed at the rat. And the rat dove off my shoulder into the gap created by my hip boot when one assumes a squatting position. And then he began to burrow in a decidedly southward direction in the area best described as my innermost thigh. This, of course, got my attention in a way that few things ever have, ever will. And so, no longer content to stay in that squatting position, I leapt up, forgetting, of course, that I am 6 feet tall and a 5-foot sewer. So my head hit the ceiling, triggering a curtain of roaches and sending me falling face first into the aforementioned.
Oh, God.
This happens. When you're face first in a river of crap, time bends. I pushed myself up in time to see the rat just bolting down the main chamber up into a lateral and gone. I spit something out of my mouth that ever should have been there. I looked over and Gene was smiling. Ransom grew up. Boy's got no gag reflex. But he never stopped rolling. God bless him. And then I heard one of the sentences that would change my life. Gene Cruz said, "Hey, when you're done screwing around with the local wildlife, why don't you come over here and give me a hand?" At this point, I can't do my job. I might as well help him do his. So I go over and I said, "What do you need?" He said, "Mix me up some mortar." "How do you do that?" "2 parts this, 1 part that." "Okay. What do you need now?" "Hand me the brick." "What do you need now?" Help me. And so, Branson shooting this whole completely unscripted encounter with a guy named Gene Cruz. And as we worked, we chatted. And as we chatted, all the stuff I'd memorized about the sewers of San Francisco the night before came out in the course of a normal, authentic, unscripted conversation. Gene Cruz was informed. He was an expert. He knew exactly what he was talking about. He was very good at what he did. He worked with speed and precision until our methane detectors went off and we all ran for our lives. Which happens a lot in the sewers of San Francisco. Here's the point of the story, at least the first point. I got out of the sewer and I drove home, thereby forever destroying the interior of my Ford F-150. I took a shower, then I took another one. I could have taken a third, but at this point, with difference to make. And I drive back to my little cubicle at CBS. Branson had left the camera and the tapes on my desk, and I wanted to watch them because I knew it would be humiliating, and I was worried about we didn't have a show for that evening. And as I watched them, I was right. It was not humiliating so much as humbling. I was seeing for the first time a guy who had done okay in his chosen field fail at every turn. I saw myself impersonating another host and doing a poor job at it. More importantly, I saw the sewer refusing to let me do my job. It was like, from the lateral to the roaches and ultimately the wreck. It was a rat intervention. That's what it was. As I watched myself fail at being a host, it was as though the sewer had conspired in some way to orchestrate this unholy baptism, And then the most extraordinary thing happened. I have to admit it was funny, watching myself in that level of distress. It was amusing, but more importantly, the conversation with Gene was transformational. For me, as a guy in TV, sitting there in my little cubicle, watching an unscripted conversation with a guy who really knew his business, I just hadn't seen it on TV before. I hadn't seen it happen like that. I was learning, but not because I was impersonating a host or trying to pretend to be smarter than I was. I was learning because I was actually working while I was talking to a guy who knew his business inside and out. And I realized in that moment that I had become profoundly disconnected from a whole lot of things that used to be really important to me. And I thought about my granddad. He was the reason I went in the sewer. But what did I do down there? All I tried to do was make it about me and keep the camera on me and put the guy doing the actual work in the background. What a bunch of bullcrap that was. But that's what I did, you know? And when I saw an actual conversation and a real interaction, man, right? I loved it. And I realized right then, I wasn't a host anymore. I was going to be something else. Maybe a guest, or maybe an avatar, maybe a perpetual apprentice. The Greeks have a word. It's a great word for discovery. It's called anagnoresis. And Aristotle argued that all great narratives are driven forward by anagnoreses, discoveries that the characters make about themselves and each other. In this way, the audience is entertained, pulled into the narrative. Not all anagnoreses are created equal. There's another kind of anagnoresis called a peripatia. And a peripatia is a very specific kind of realization. We all have them. All great literature has peripatetic moments, or peripety. And it's the kind of discovery that fundamentally changes the trajectory of the narrative. It fundamentally changes what the protagonist is going to do, because it changes who the protagonist actually is. The most famous one is probably in Oedipus Rex, which some of you might be familiar with. We learned that Oedipus, the king of Thebes, falls in love with an older woman and marries her. And he has some anagnoreses. He discovers that making love with an older woman is rather enjoyable. And then later, when he discovers that the older woman, who is the mother of his children, is also his mother, we have a peripatia, and the entire plot changes. Remember the Sixth Sense? Bruce Willis? Spoiler alert, I'm going to totally wreck this movie. If you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, it's been 20 years, so whatever. But Bruce Willis starts as a psychiatrist and he wants to help little Cole because poor little Cole thinks he sees dead people and his mom's afraid he might be crazy. And so is Bruce Willis, but as the movie goes on, Bruce has an anagnoresis. Little Cole might not be crazy. He might actually be able to see dead people. And then in the final act, Bruce Willis gets it. Ah, crap. Cole can see me. I'm dead. And he was. And I'm sitting there at my desk, looking at myself, crawl through a river of crap, and I realized, I'm dead. I've been doing something well, and I've been rewarded for it fairly. But it's not me. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do. So I resolved in that minute, right there, no more host, be a guest. And I took all of the humiliations from the rat to the exploding lateral to the roaches, and I put them into a montage. And I cut it together in a way that led up to my actual interview with Gene Cruz. And I showed it to my boss. And I said, what do you think? Can we put this on the air? He said, I don't care. Great. This is the best boss ever. So the following evening, I put on a 4.5-minute look at the sewers of San Francisco that included everything I just described, as well as the conversation with Gene. And my inbox blew up. The response was exactly what you want in television. Half passionate engagement, half shocked, outraged. TV Magazine, people were sitting down to have a nice meatloaf casserole. And they hit the face with a totally. But God, they loved it. They they just ate it up, you know, and they didn't eat it up. Kids. They loved it. And they started sending me ideas for, you know, their brother, uncle, cousin, sister, mom, dad, second, twice removed, whatever. You should see what my friend does, right? And I'm thinking, this is a thing. I've never seen anything on TV like it. And so I called it Somebody's Gotta Do It. And I did 20 more of these things all around the Bay Area. And the audience grew and people loved it. And then my boss retired and the new boss said, I really don't want to see you collect the semen from a bull called Unsucker Commando while I'm trying to have dinner. Which I did, and it's another story. Maybe I'll tell you later. So we started to argue over what was appropriate, what was inappropriate, and of course I lost the argument, but I did retain the rights to Somebody's Got to Do It. And I shopped it around, and the Discovery Channel bought it, and they changed the name to Dirty Jobs. And off we go. Now, here's the second part of the story that I find interesting. I went to a community college, 2 years, studied everything. And I worked for a little bit, then I went to university for a couple years, studied some more stuff. But my education didn't start, honestly, until I was 41 years old, in the sewers of San Francisco, and dirty jobs. And for the next 8 years, I traveled about 270 nights a year. And I worked in every state multiple times in, I think, every industry, from mining to agriculture to everything in between. And the peripeteias, they never stopped. I started to keep a journal. I started to write about it because I really just couldn't get past it. Every week, I realized that something I thought I knew with certainty was actually wrong. And I just felt like I was getting the most interesting, accidental, continuing education course in the history of academics. But I couldn't really talk about it because it was in the context of an entertainment program. But here's the crazy thing about Dirty Jobs. It gets on the air, you know, I mean, we totally Forrest Gumped our way on the air. And then people start really watching it. And then it just goes, I guess you guys would call it viral. And by 2005, it's the #1 show on Discovery. By 2006, I'm narrating Deadliest Catch and a bunch of other work-related shows. The whole industry is starting to evolve out of the show. By 2007, it's in 233 countries. And in 2008, it gets really interesting because the economy, as some of you might recall, had a little hiccup. And Dirty Jobs was a big presence in pop culture. And as the recession worsened, I began to get extraordinary phone calls from reporters asking me my take on things. I crawl through a sewer, right? I don't know what my take on things are, but one day in Crane, Colorado, we were castrating lambs with our teeth, actually. I don't know if any of you saw that. It's a job. It happens. And I was right in the middle of the work, and I was expecting a call from the network, and I thought that was the call I got, but it was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. And he said, I'd like your feedback on something. And I said, what? He said, well, the latest unemployment numbers just came out. We're looking at 12% right now, but the skills gap appears to be widening. How do you reconcile these two dichotomous data points? What? So you're a guy with an interesting point of view, an interesting perspective. What do you think's going on? So I spit the testicles out of my mouth. There's your hashtag. Okay. Something should trend. So no, I wipe myself off and I tell the crew to take a break. And I answer the reporter's question. And I say, I'll tell you exactly what I think's going on. And I told him about my peripeteia. I told him about my disconnect. I told him about my steadfast belief that I wasn't the only one who had become disconnected from a great many important things in our society. And if I had a soapbox, I would have stood on it, because I probably sound like I was testifying. And looking back, I probably was. But I talked about the incredible disconnect between our food and our assumption of where it comes from, and energy, and work, and education. And I talked about the fact that on dirty jobs, everywhere I looked, I saw unemployment signs. Even at a time when the headline news said there were no jobs, I'm talking to people day in and day out who can't find people who are willing to learn a skill that's actually in demand, show up early, stay late, and take a bite of the poop sandwich when it comes around. I mean, there was a real outcry. And so I could hear the guy typing away as I was talking, and when I got done, he goes, hey, you know what, that's kind of an interesting take. I'm glad I called you. What are you going to do about it? So what do you want from me, man? I'm busy with the lambs right now. He said, no, you've got good cards. And I said, well, part of what I want to do is show work as it really exists. And I think Dirty Jobs has done a pretty fair job at doing that. He said, you can do better. Who the hell is this guy? But he was right. And so I talked to, I don't have an agent or a publicist or a manager. I never have. I have a partner. Her name's Mary. She's down here. I said to her, what do you think I'm going to do with this? You know, I mean, we really do have an interesting thing, and the headlines in the country have caught up to the themes of my show. The headlines have caught up to my pericope. And she said, why don't you start a foundation? Why don't you talk about it? So I did. It's called MicroWorks, and the purpose was simply to give myself a platform. So people like you would invite me to come to places like this to talk about the things I'm about to talk about. Because honestly, it's PR, folks. So much of what's going on in the country right now, and so many of the problems that the reporter asked me about, a crumbling infrastructure, currency devaluation, a widening skills gap, outsourcing, manufacturing, these things that we typically look at as problems are formidable and real, but what if they're not? What if they're not problems at all, but symptoms? What if they're symptoms of our larger relationship with work? What if that relationship has somehow been fractured? What if we collectively become disconnected from those same fundamental things I talked about? And what if that disconnect has ultimately informed many of the problems I just mentioned? Well, it's just a theory. But after that article hit the journal, I started to get calls from all sorts of companies to come and chat. And one of the first calls came from the FFA. Anybody familiar with the Future Farmers of America? Yes, great. They've been around forever. They do yeoman's work. There are maybe 800,000 members of the Future Farmers of America, and they're primarily kids. And it's the best way modern agriculture has to inspire and excite the next generation to continue the business of feeding us, right? And so I said, yeah, I'd love to go and talk. And it was at the big convention center in Indianapolis. 20,000 kids in this place. It was like the stadium last night. I've never seen such a crowd. And I really didn't know what I wanted to tell them. But I'm standing backstage looking through the preparatory brief that they've given me. And right there on the first page, another pericope. The Future Farmers of America no longer wish to be referred to as the Future Farmers of America. We have officially changed our designation to FFA. Why? Well, on the second page, I explain why exactly. Because as a recruiting organization, the word farmer has become an impediment to recruitment. We're so disconnected from our food that the people who grow it and the people who feed us can no longer refer to themselves as farmers because it's hurting their ability to duplicate their work. That's a problem. It's a PR problem. And I totally understood it. We're to the point now where you think about what the American farmer was once upon a time. He and she were heroic. Agriculture defined their GDP. We understood the importance of farmers. Today, 1.5% of the population feeds 300 million people, 3 squares a day. And we're just not all that impressed. We're just not gobsmacked by the fact that that miracle happens every day. It's pulled off by less than 3 million people, and 300 million benefit. What's going on in the skilled trades? Is it really so different? When you flick on the light, you flip the switch and the light comes on, do you say, wow, good job, electric company? Good job. When you flush the toilet, the crap goes away and you go, nice job. Sewer system? No, it's only when the crap doesn't go away, or the lights don't come on. Or, God forbid, I log onto my Facebook thing tonight and I can't get connected. It's an outrage. What's going on? This is an outrage. So, I started to think about what really is happening, not just on a metaphorical sewer level, but what's actually happening in the real world to fuel this disconnect. And I remembered a fateful encounter. I hadn't thought of it for years, but when I was in high school, I was summoned to the guidance counselor's office to talk about my future. I'd taken some tests, and apparently I'd done okay because Mr. Dunbar had a plan. Mr. Dunbar had a plan. And he said, I think University of Maryland or University of James Madison. That's where you should go. I didn't have any money. More importantly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I said, I'm going to go to the community college, and I'm going to try it out. He said, no, you're not. I said, yeah, I think I am. He goes, no, you don't want to do that. It's totally beneath your potential. And then he pointed to a poster behind his desk. That's the poster there. And it's pretty self-explanatory. This was a PR campaign for college that was launched in the early 70s. And you can see a recently matriculated graduate holding his diploma, looking optimistically off into the horizon. And next to him, you can see a worker holding a wrench, looking down. Obviously the recipient of some vocational consolation prize. And he said, which one of these guys do you want to be? And I thought of my granddad. What I really wanted to do was lean across the desk and give old Mr. Dunbar a slap. I didn't. I thought it'd be fun to break back into the school later with a magic marker and cross out not and write in and. Because look at the bottom of the post. Work smart, not hard. Are you kidding me? In the history of bad advice, how much worse can it get? Google it. Not now. Google work smart, not hard. You will see hundreds of pages dedicated to this bromide, this platitude. You'll see it emblazoned on schlag from conventions. You'll find books with that title. It's the worst advice in the world. It's the kind of advice that would make my granddad throw up in his mouth. You know? It's just awful. So, what if we took it? What if we took that advice collectively? What if after 30 years of saying, work smart, not hard, we started to believe that maybe there was no need to work hard? What if we focused so much on being efficient that we forgot about the business of being effective? What if that happened? MicroWorks basically is based on that theory. I think maybe I took some bad advice. I became disconnected from a lot of things that matter, and I don't think I'm alone. And so over the years, since 2008, we've been focused on partnering with companies who give a crap, focused on partnering with institutions that want to help change that basic message. This alternative poster was done with Caterpillar, who I've worked with now for years. And that's me holding the diploma. And you can see I don't look nearly as excited as my counterpart, 35 years earlier. I'm not wearing any pants either, which is another story altogether. That happened. But my diploma is at my side, and it's not It's not a terrible thing to have a diploma. It's a wonderful thing to have a diploma. It's just that my diploma didn't educate me for any of the opportunities that were available. And the diploma today for so many kids comes along with the $70, $80, $90, $100,000 price tag. Guys, we have $1.2 trillion in student loans on the books right now. $1.2 trillion. We hold the note, okay? Meanwhile, when we talk about education, what do we talk about today? We talk about higher education over here. That's what everybody wants for their kids. And over here we have alternative education. Alternative to what? Right? But that's what we do. We don't mean to, but language matters. What we say matters, and how we describe opportunities matter. So this is a very, very small thing we did. MicroWorks does hundreds of things like this, but I just wanted to go back in time and correct that offending poster. And now, you know, people buy them for 10 or 12 bucks. We've sold thousands of them, and they're in schools around the country now, and it makes me feel good to think that maybe I did manage to reach out and cross out not and write in and maybe take one small poke at these prevailing platitudes that are slowly sucking the life out of the country, in my humble opinion. So, that's a long way of saying that I came here to say thank you, essentially. Because getting this message out and changing the way the country feels about the definition of a good job and about the definition of a valuable education, getting the country focused on skills and art, getting things like skill and art back in STEM, making it STEAM, actually, right? So, there's a macro solution and there's a micro solution. I got the micro thing down. It's small and it's modest, and we chip away at these prevailing stereotypes. But we need macro help. Last point. Back in 1953, the country had a massive problem with our relationship with litter. We were pigs, way more so than we are today. We'd have picnics and leave all the stuff behind. And we just throw stuff out the window. You know, I remember my own parents, who were very responsible people. We just didn't think about littering the same way we did today. The country had a broken relationship with litter, and we needed to change it. And so what happened was, some government agencies got together with some NGOs, some concerned individuals, and they formed a consortium called Keep America Beautiful. Remember the Indian standing by the side of the road, right? With the big tear running down his eye as some thoughtless American throws the trash out the window? That campaign has been around for decades, and it worked. It actually worked. Took time. Took a generation and a half, maybe two. But Keep America Beautiful is still around right now. We don't litter as much right now because we fundamentally changed our relationship with litter. We need to fundamentally change our relationship with work. We need to challenge the prevailing definition of a good job. And that's exactly what you guys do. Whether you know it or not, look back at that poster. If I can ask you guys to put the second poster up there one last time. There we go. See the guy on the right? He's actually my cameraman. His name's Taylor. He just happened to be available. But I said, Taylor, I want to do this with you. And he said, sure. That, compared to his counterpart 40 years ago, is what I'm talking about. There are a lot of different ways to make a better case for work. But the key is connectivity. That's what the people in the pedicab told me to talk about yesterday. And I know I took the scenic route. But let's face it, guys. Gene Cruz, down the sewers of San Francisco, hammering away at those bricks. That's a metaphor for you all. You're the plumbers of the 21st century. The infrastructure that we now rely upon today is every bit as vital to our own sanity as making sure the poop goes away when we flush the toilet. You're keeping us connected. Unfortunately for Cisco, people don't drive down the road and go, oh, look at that router. You know? The router's out of sight. Gene Cruz is out of sight. The sewers of San Francisco are out of sight as well. But believe me when I tell you, they're there. We're here, and I couldn't be happier and more grateful for the opportunity to do what we just did. This will conclude my comments. Thank you so much.